There was a time I was running out of,
And were you
and at
working
night,
for?
I run with a habit bill, so that I can, when the lights are coming towards me, I can cut it. So I don't lose my night vision, and I ran into one of those poles.
What happened?
Oh,
Oh, right.
that's what I'm like most afraid of.
And it was like, you know, cause you're processing, it's like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I ran into a telephone. It was just a sequence of, you know, the lights, me looking down.
Yeah. And then it was there.
And then it was there.
Yeah.
I've only done it once.
Right.
Once.
Well, that's not so bad.
And that's not so bad.
Running at night's perilous.
It is. I don't mind it though. It's sort of zen for me.
I like it in
Because,
the summer, but I don't like the
no, not now. It's in the summer.
Yeah.
No, cause I gotta see the road better
And when you
because of the ice.
Same.
Do you wear
I don't
spikes
trust
summer?
myself anymore.
No.
Yeah.
You know, we used to do college, we used to do it all the time. You
At
know,
night?
running night in the,
In the snow?
yeah,
Yeah.
all the time. You were fearless.
No,
Yeah, I didn't think I would ever hurt myself.
Invincible. No, it's
Now
not.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna hurt myself. Oh.
Jeff, do you wear spikes in the winter or not?
I don't yet, but I have them on my Christmas list.
Those are a good thing. I mean, when I ran, and of course,
Do you wear spikes ever?
Yeah.
you know, we did PT in the dark every day in Alaska. And, I mean, not.
But that was a long time ago.
Research
Right,
about
but they
when
still do it.
Did you have spikes?
Yeah.
It was so much more recent that
In one of those times for the PT test, we actually used like traction spikes because it was,
Yeah, so
I did mine in October and April. And it was ice 30 below each time.
Yeah, the ice is really hard. What I worry about is the bumpiness.
Alaska was nice, it was like a hockey stick.
All right, everyone, it's 6 past, so if anybody trickles in, we can include everyone in. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I know it was not a lot of notice, and there's a few people that couldn't make it. But we really just wanted to get the select board and the budget committee together before we actually, you know, finalize the budget and send out the budget books and then get into the whole discussion and budget committee process. Just to kind of figure out how can we make the process go more smoothly, how can we have it be more collaborative in terms of, you know, the budget committee and the select board and how it all, you know, sort of gets, you know, reconciled between the, you know, different recommendations, and just get some more, you know, feedback in general on, you know, how we can make this, I guess, you know, more meaningful to everyone and improve things. So if we could go around and everybody introduce yourself, and also just talk a bit, if you're a budget committee member, about you know, why you decided to join the budget committee, and select board members, if you could kind of talk a little bit about what you're hoping to sort of see out of the budget this year. That would be, I think, a good way to start.
I'll start. Courtney Seaforth, I'm on the budget committee. I was actually asked to be on budget committee a while ago, years ago, from Allison, and I'm glad that you asked, because it's been a really great experience for me in trying to learn and understand. I was never really that much involved with town anything, and it's been really kind of an eye-opening experience to see how it all works together and how we make it happen. So it's been fun.
Fun. Yeah. Allison McKellar. I was recruited for the budget committee. I guess I've been on the select board for 8 or 9 years now, and I was on the budget committee for a couple years before that. I too was I grew up here, but was very disconnected from town government. Never heard my parents mention going to town meeting or anything like that. I was sitting in one of those open town meetings, and Leonard Lookner said, you know, they didn't have enough people. We used to need to get 21, and so that really forced them to reach outside of the circle, so they would take anybody. And Leonard Lookner one year said, oh, well, I see somebody here who could do it. And that's how I got on the budget committee. And that ever since then, every single year, I've seen it be, an upsetting process for many people, but almost every year, it's like people are upset about different things. Like, it's like, well, the process is broken because it's, you know, we're focusing on too many little things, or we're not allowed to ask about this, or there were too many meetings, or there weren't enough meetings, and it feels like there's no perfect way to do it. I think for me, the most valuable thing about the budget committee for the town over the years has been it, like, as a recruitment tool to get people involved, and that's why I very much would like to change the name of it. It started back when we didn't have professional staff, and it really needed to be about the budget, but I would like to see the budget process be a little bit more fun and engaging, and to have it be that when we get to the end of it, it feels like there's a meaningful recommendation to give to the citizens who are voting, so it's not so, you know, you look at the budget committee recommendation, the select board recommendation, sometimes the numbers are different, but the recommendation is actually not different because of just how awkward the process is. And so, yeah, I'd like to see it be a little bit more fun in the future and meaningful to the citizens.
Well, I'm Karen Grove. I've been on the budget committee now on and off for 12 years. I've always lived in towns with town government. Even the place I came from, Brookline, Massachusetts, had representative town government. I believe that with the budget committee, knowing the white underbelly of what's going on with the town and how they're spending money is really serious and needs to be open to anyone. We used to have 28 people, I think it was, on the budget committee, and if we got 21, that was a quorum. I never attended a meeting that didn't have the 21. It was amazing how many people got involved in it. And most of the time it was pretty easy. Every now and then there were big questions that came up. But at the end of the day, everybody understood, at least 21 people in town, plus the select board, knew what was going on with the money, the taxes and all, and that felt a lot more comfortable.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk briefly about the process and perhaps goal setting. I have noticed in monitoring the last few years that if the budget committee does not set a goal, then they take the process line by line, and every idea is a good idea. So I would suggest that you, the budget committee, set an overall goal. I mentioned the other night that my personal income from Social Security is capped at 2.8%. So I would say that's a good starting point. Let's talk about 2.8%. I've heard 0% increase as well. But I think it's time. Other citizens have pointed out how much the Camden's municipal spending has grown over the last few years, and this would be a good year to rein that into, let's say, 2.8%. In general, if this group can set a goal, then you'll have some way, some rubric to apply to every budget that comes up, and some means to decide whether it's meeting that goal or not. So there you go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Nolan. I agree with what Ken mentioned about hold the budget steady compared to the recent years. If there is an addition somewhere, there probably should be a cut somewhere else. I like what we did last year. We should have done it with a couple other items. We have special capital items. Those are nice to be voted on by the town. We did that with, I want to say fire truck, maybe ambulance, snowball windows, the snowcat. I think those things are good. I would have liked to have done the same thing with paid parking. It would have been at least the funding source of it to be voted on by the town. When we do have things that are going to be some part of only word I know is loan, that we're going to do, there's a proper term that I'm not thinking about, for when we do budget expenditures that we put a little bit longer term to show what the impact is going to be to the budgets down the road. We usually talk about what's coming off from capital expenditures, but we don't always show long-term, hey, if we do this $16 million thing, it's gonna be causing this to the budget over time. And I think that that's important to do. And I don't know if we have to consider, you know, programs that we've done in the past or want to do, if there's going to be any impacts for grant cutting to a Democratic-oriented state. If we have to consider some elements in there. Isn't that fun? Yeah. That was more fun.
Slightly different take.
I'm Chris Farley, the fire chief, and I am a user of the process, so I'm just here to listen to your process.
I'm Chris O'Rowe, I'm on the select board. This is my first, I've managed to avoid the budget process despite being involved in various other things in the town. I was asked once or twice to serve on the budget committee and kind of punted that to other people. So I'm going to be more of a quiet learner in the process as I go through.
I'm Marina Sedaris, I'm on the budget committee. Last year, I don't really remember if I was asked to join or what, but I was slow to make a decision, and when I did eventually volunteer, that there were already enough people. So I served as an alternate and got a little introduction to the process, which was great. I've lived here, I was born here, and lived here most of my life, although I was away for about a decade. Been back for the past 14 years, and yeah, I'm just very interested to learn more about how our town prioritizes what needs to be done. So looking forward to being part of the process again.
I didn't prepare anything. Jeff Scott,
Actually, not very interesting either.
and this is my second year. I think I was recruited by Allison also, or asked, was it?
I can't imagine I would have suggested that.
Yeah.
I think it was like, well, why don't you do the budget committee if you have so many good ideas?
And when I was with family and work and all that stuff, I couldn't do it. There's just no way. Didn't have the time, and it wasn't consistent. I was traveling, and so it didn't work. But in those roles, I was doing budgets all the time. So I'm comfortable with spreadsheets and numbers and looking at them and understanding the compromises that have to be made. So it's not super hard for me to settle into this. So I said, yeah, sure. And it gives me another perspective, I mean, which is good about the town. Can't complain when you understand.
Pathways, you've been a little bit involved.
Yeah, I've been a little bit involved in Pathways too.
For what, 30 years or?
You know, I just looked at it, you know, I can't believe it. You know, I was organizing that summit meeting in 2001.
I know, it's alarming.
I just said, okay, here's the agenda. I was looking at the engineering drawings. This was Summit for Route 90 when we had a grant. And I go, oh my gosh, I'm organizing a charrette. And I didn't even know what I was doing.
To try to get safe pedestrian and bicycle access to the high school. A
Yeah.
town goal when we moved high school out of town.
Yeah. What a great idea.
That, yeah,
What a great idea.
You should work on that.
yeah.
I'm gonna start working on it.
Jeff has been working on it again, yeah.
I'm working
He
on
needs
it.
help.
Still working on it. Thank you.
My name is Jody Hanson. I'm from West Rockport. I've been with the town of Camden for 8 years, and I've been in municipal government for 28 years. Municipal finance. I'm looking forward to another year of fun-filled budget things.
So I'm Audra Kaler, the town manager, and, you know, for every budget that we go into, I hope that, or my goal is that we come out with a budget that really meets the greatest level of need in the community in a cost-effective way, and that all the folks who were involved in putting it together, which is gonna be everybody who's sitting in this room, feels like it was a meaningful process that they were able to contribute to and have their opinion heard. So, I guess now that we've done introductions, and really there's, there's a agenda to try to like keep us on track, but I think that this being a conversation just about the process and how we can make it better, and, anything that you noticed from previous years is gonna be far more valuable, as we're kind of setting things up, for March. So, feel free to stray off track or butt in or whatever it is, because I think the conversation is much more important. So I gave everybody a copy of the budget review schedule for the budget committee. So I guess based on, if you just take a quick look and skim through that, and then based on your involvement in previous years, because I think every single person here was on the budget committee in a past year, or, very familiar with the process. If you could just kind of give us an idea of, as you were involved, what are, we always kind of become a bit pinched for time, and so, what are ways that we can go about this so you think that we have time to talk about some of the most important aspects of the budget, and that we're not spending a lot of time on, some of the other areas that aren't as important to all of you as we go about this.
Audra, real quick, are there other participants that are in orange? I can't tell what it says.
Janice
Looks
and
like
Janice,
Janet, you can see twice.
Yeah, Janice and
Okay.
Janice,
and Jeremy somewhere.
Attendees.
Jeremy and Carrie are watching from afar.
Okay. I just wanna make sure. So we don't really have, how many are on the budget committee?
There
I
was a
think there's
quorum.
3 of us, 1, 2, 3.
No, there's 4 here. How many are on the committee?
Yeah, what's the quorum?
It's 8 with an option of
Okay.
2 more alternates. That's the new charter, right? Was it 8?
It was 11.
11?
So we're missing a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people are traveling, because it's right before.
Is there a date that's missing on here, or missing a Thursday in between the 12th and the 26th, or are we taking that week
Yeah, I'll have to take a look and see if there's a reason for that. Because it would be the 19th.
Right.
And is there a reason why we're doing this on Thursdays as compared to Tuesdays? Usually it ends up being a select board meeting.
Yeah,
That
I'll
last
just-
one that you have there, which is usually a Tuesday.
Budget committee meetings have been Thursdays for
Okay.
ever,
Okay.
it's like,
My question is, should that last one be a Tuesday select board meeting?
Yeah, I guess what does everybody think of that, having
I
the
mean,
last?
that's what we did it
That's
last,
fine.
the other times, right? It ends up being the public hearing. Is that what was intended there, or was that intended to be something different?
I think this is just the budget committee meetings, and we'll
Okay.
still have that, select board meeting where you have your,
Okay.
review and approval.
so with the schedule, the first thing that's jumping out to me, and I can't tell if maybe I'm misunderstanding, because I think I'm seeing certain things on twice, but, it feels like the order, and maybe you've already fully considered this, but that the order should be somewhat in order of, like, the largest, maybe town core services, largest discussions. I love the library, and I'm certainly not trying to pick on the library or the opera house or the, but I know there've been a few years where I've been on the budget committee and seen that everybody is like, at the beginning, feeling like, oh, sure, what's another $20,000, or this is so important, and there's a lot of energy for that kind of thing, and then you get to the end, and you're dealing with like the hard realities and difficult decisions, and everybody's tired, and we're talking, that's when we're talking about the sort of town core services. So I would just wanna, try to put the extra things nearer to the end, so that if we do run out of time, we have less time to talk about the library. I think that's, an area that needs our discussion less.
That's a good idea.
Is there intent on why there are duplicate items, like we're talking about Parks and Rec twice, or is it just the way it was?
The first meeting, the general overview, we just kind of like broad brush everything, and then the next 3 meetings, the next 2 meetings, it's all the department presentations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Do we need the broad brush?
I think probably, so is that you mostly leading that?
That's mostly me,
Broad brush
just-
is helpful for the budget committee, I think.
Okay, so I'm misunderstanding that, but it's not that the presentation from the library and the opera houses, that's you just.
Yeah, so they'd be presenting on the 12th.
I'm
So would
almost
you
thinking-
consider the snowball in the broad brush too, maybe? We should at least.
Well,
It's a little early.
Snowball kind of goes towards the end usually, because they don't, their budget's not done until,
What can it be in the broad brush? I mean, I'm just thinking like, if we're trying to look at the overall costs and
what we can do,
whoever the library.
probably not their operations budget, but any capital, like, Snowball capital projects or equipment.
But that would come in capital, wouldn't it, or separate? Wouldn't it be capital and contingency?
We
Got
usually,
that.
they're like, whether or not there's
Yeah.
that $250,000 overage sort of thing.
Right.
Is that codified now for them, or is that just every year?
It's a year by year thing, so we don't really know until April.
So that would be part of the meeting with the select board again at that point.
Yeah, well, and
Why don't we know
that's a
until-
good thing to ask the budget committee, because that came up as a big, big ticket item for everybody to make a decision about last year.
Yeah,
Would the budget committee like to be involved in that discussion because we've carried forward a debt from the snowball from last year into this financial year. Things are operationally, it's looking like it's gonna be a better year, but there still might be debt from FY '25 that we need to address.
oh, really?
Yeah. I think it'll be far reduced from what it would have been.
Yeah.
So, that's one of those, I think it would just be good to have broader input if the budget committee's interested in taking that on. And that's kind of outside of this schedule, because we won't know until April when the,
The snowball tends to do this, spending their budget, because their earnings run the same way. Some years you have a lot of snow, some years you had none. We had a deficit for, 3 or 4 years in a row, and then all of a sudden, we had a snowy winter that started in November and went through the middle of April, and the debt was clear. So with them, you just never know.
Right.
I think it would be helpful to include in the broad brush a little discussion of this. So that
Yeah.
everyone on the budget committee sort of understands how the snowball budget works and interacts with the rest of the town. And then we could maybe ask at that point, like, does the budget committee want to be part of, when we get to the end of the snowball season or whatever? I'm not even clear on what the process is, but maybe we ask at that point with a little bit more grounding in the process.
That's really helpful, and I think it might be helpful, especially to the new people on the budget committee, to have a little narrative that explains things like the snowball, where the budget goes up and down and the debt goes up and down, and this is why. And that would clear up a whole lot for people who are brand new and don't understand the budget as it's been in the past.
Yeah, like a little primer on some of these
You know,
things that come up over and over again.
Yeah, the major explanation points.
yeah, well, we
Yeah.
get the explanation points from the people who run those departments, but we get it right then,
Yeah,
and we have to make the decision right then. if we had a little primer before
Right.
that, where we could go over it, it might clarify a lot for people.
Yeah, these are the usual things, and this is the usual cycle, yeah. You know, just like the chief might have, these are the certain things that happen on a whatever basis for training or cyclically on capital expenditures. Yes, that's helpful to understand the cycles, so that also too looks long-term, of what to expect.
Audra, when you did this lineup, were you considering what topics might be more talked about more controversial, whatever you wanna say, or did you just sort of copy from last year?
It's more of copying from, and grouping things by, you know, the category that
Yeah.
they're listed in the warrant.
Would it be, is it being too nimble if, and I know it's about 2 weeks, it's a lot of work that has to go. During those 2 weeks, you're gonna start seeing where the tension exists, and you're gonna tell us where that tension exists on the 26th.
Yes.
And we're gonna see it, that's when we're gonna read about it. And then, could we set the next 2 agendas after that? Or, say, take a hand count and say, who wants to talk about the Snow Bowl first? Who wants to talk about, or, you've got staff that has things to do too, so I don't know if that's being too nimble or not, but when I see it, I'll know it. But it's hard to say now what the hot topics are unless you know what's happening in each department.
You know, what
That's
would
gonna
be
be really hard
helpful
for department heads.
to
It's gonna
that,
be, that's what I,
That makes it difficult for the department heads.
It
She
does.
said, because they have to be in attendance to make their presentation.
yeah, but it's not that week, it's the next 2 weeks.
right,
So they have a week notice, that's,
She kind of knows already what some of, I would, what
do
some of the
you,
big
that's why I
things,
asked
what
whether
some
you
of the
had
big
said it.
things.
Yeah.
If you already know it, maybe you could adjust it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and also like, when you have the Thursday thing, how tough would it be to say, this particular area is X percent of the budget? Just a little,
Oh,
whatever,
not
Parks and Rec is
difficult at all.
like 28% or whatever, it is, just to give an idea, to say,
Yeah, that's
how
fine.
big of a thing is
What,
this?
I mean, we could even do charts.
Just little,
Some, yeah, that is good to help
Yeah.
everybody throughout the process, just keep things in perspective
right,
a little bit. And then also sometimes when there's a corresponding revenue offset,
right,
to just flag that. I know it's not gonna be perfect, but just to help us understand where what really makes a difference.
Audra, another thing that I noticed here, last year, our discussions on committee nights ran over. So we backed up the time from 6:30 to 6. These all say 6:30.
except the
Can we
first one.
back that up to 6
Yeah.
o'clock
Yeah, absolutely.
so that we can be out of there by 8?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So 6 PM to 8 PM meetings.
Yeah. I think last year we just decided to wherever we were
think
at
we
8 o'clock,
decided
we were
that.
done.
We moved it to 6. Yeah, I remember that.
Is there a time on here where I say we, I don't know how much the select board will or won't participate or how, not necessarily we, but.
That's a
Right, I know that's the thing we have to, because one of the big issues that comes up every year is, the select board a lot of time just watches, like, kind of like, and, then we have comments, and sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, if I had thought about that as part of the conversation, I might have had a different perspective, and then the select board and the town staff are kind of exhausted by the time it really gets to the select board, and we're running out of time, and then we have like one meeting or maybe 2, which I always kind of feel like the select board ends up kind of copping out and being like, oh, the budget committee said this, and not really taking responsibility in some ways. But that's sort of another, which is why I think some talking throughout the process is helpful. But revenues are such a huge part of offsetting taxes, that having the budget committee a little bit involved in understanding the impact of fees and sort of the philosophy about fees and how strictly we want to adhere to that. With micro solid waste, we've set this really pretty rigid policy about everything other than recycling, which we've made a decision to subsidize. We try to pass on every fee to the user. We give you a chance to bring down your trash bill as much as possible by recycling for free, but you know, if you have mattresses, all of these things that are used unequally by residents, we don't want everybody subsidizing that, and I think we should try to be doing that in the town as much as possible too. But I mean, that's where paid parking comes from too, but to kind of get an overview of the opportunities for offsetting expenses and what kind of an impact that can have on taxes, so that when we have a paid parking discussion, or we have a discussion about
Harbor
STR fees or harbor fees, or you know, what's the basic value behind that? Is our job to make it so that every Camden resident can afford a dinghy permit if they want a dinghy permit? Or is it our job to say, this is a kind of a scarce resource that is filling up and we need to, you know, keep the fees unchecked with supply and demand, or, but we never, the budget committee never talks about revenues, or, we have not this year, we have not actually voted yet on the fees. I see you're doing that thing where you're not, where you're like, I feel like you might not agree.
Yeah.
Well, no, I do, it's not that, I'm trying to figure out how
do it.
to involve the budget committee in this to get like input on how, you know, how we have that discussion, or how we represent it in the budget, and I just don't know the right question to ask
Is
everybody.
there a way, like, for example, with the revenues to without making it a page-long spreadsheet, to say, basically, you know, these are the primary revenue sources, and again, what the percentage of that is.
So, you know, we have like it's like the green page in the budget, that is the
Yep.
revenue page, so it's pretty, you know, it's pretty.
Is that as small as you can make it?
Yeah, and then, you know, what we've been doing over the past couple of years, we have like another page at the back, you know, you have like the, for the expense budget, we have, you know, like the department expense budget, where it's the line items and then the explanation of all the line items. And then behind that, we have the summary, which is expenses, revenues.
Okay.
So, you know, like with the harbor department, it shows, you know, these are all the harbor expenses, these are all the revenues, and this is the net.
On the same page.
Yeah. So I guess, did everyone use that? Did you find it helpful?
I
Is
guess
there?
not.
No, I
Did
used
you-
it,
did
I
you-
used it, I
yeah.
remember it. Yeah, that was really good. I didn't like the flipping back and forth, but
Right.
you gotta do something.
Yeah.
And that, it's just a question of getting in there and reading it.
I just can't think of another way to spell out the department itself and the net, as far as how
Yeah.
else we can do that, besides just doing a side-by-side
Well,
comparison of.
Can we do that, on the paperwork that is sent to the budget committee, that the fees for each department could be on the page rather than on separate
On the
Well,
pages?
we have-
page.
Oh, right, well,
Well, what
Maybe,
about,
I mean, I think it's a broader, it's more of like, because you know, the cost of different things change, but it's more having you go over the sort of the general philosophy and the choices that we make, and if there are places where we're making a decision to subsidize something as a community, like the Snow Bowl, for instance. We have made a decision that, you know, we aren't gonna just try to pass on every fee to the user, we subsidize that so that it can still be reasonable, but that conversation often just happens a little bit in a vacuum, and it's sort of reactive, like, oh, is it okay to raise these fees this year or not? And it feels like the harbor comes up a lot. We have people on a wait list for years and years and years and years. They would gladly pay more, many of them, but we have this sort of value of like, waiting longer is how you get on there rather than paying more. And I think it would be helpful to me as a select board member to kind of identify some of these things, like, okay, we want to
Yeah.
subsidizing this, we don't wanna be, we wanna subsidize it for Camden residents, or if our goal is to make it so somebody that might not be able to afford a dinghy permit can afford it, maybe we help them in some other way. But to have a direction, like, okay, the budget committee said we're supposed to be having, these things cover themselves.
So,
Yeah, make a policy level
Yeah.
discussion about fees and.
yeah, I mean, looking at the schedule, like, at no point in the schedule is there just really a discussion of revenue.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
On the schedule, there's really, and traditionally, there hasn't been a meeting where revenue is actually discussed, and it's sort of ends up being on the user to fill in those gaps, even like in the final product, there's a whole number, and you're just assuming, oh, well, that's property taxes it doesn't always say specifically, so in that, I mean, to me, in that first February 26th meeting, it would seem that that's a very good session to take some time on what are the revenues, what revenues are targeted for specific things, so harbor fees go to harbor costs, what goes to general, what doesn't, and then what fills in the rest, because we do have other sources of, do we take it out of TIF, does it come, explaining TIF for a lot of people is a bit of a learning curve.
Because when, I've seen a lot of really incorrect things written about the Camden budget, for instance, and there's this tendency to look, oh, if you look at expenses, and, you can twist that into saying, oh, well, over the past 10 years, expenses have gone up 50% or whatever. But that is a completely sort of misleading and unhelpful way to look at it, because what most people care about is the impact to taxpayers. If we're doing things in the harbor that are generating as much revenue as the expenses that go into them, it's, the taxpayers don't really see any of that. It makes a really big difference when we decide to do things that are not funded by non-taxpayer revenue. And I think an understanding of that,
Yeah, that's, to Chris's point, in the agenda that's listed, the only time that revenues are mentioned is in the first one of other special revenues. The other ones are related to projects and expenditures and not revenues. But if there are revenues that are associated, just making sure to add them in.
I just want to push back a little bit, because I remember discussions last year a lot about revenues, specifically.
It's just not in the agenda this year.
But it comes up when you're talking about funding, and like the discussions where was the cleaning person going to be allocated, and where was Pixley's money divided, and the revenue at the harbor and how that offset, and the revenue at the Snow Bowl, and because that got kind of hairy with the percentages. But I do remember those conversations.
But
It gets
just my
brought up,
point
but
is,
there's
it comes up sometimes
Haphazard.
partway through the process because it hasn't been explained. And I mean, there could be some stuff in the overall budget that has, if there's an asterisk next to it, that's just coming from general funds, and then things get labeled, this is a discretionary fund, this is a revenue stream, so that when anyone is looking at it at any point in the process, you can sort of say, oh, that comes from that revenue stream, and we aren't halfway through in a meeting being like, well,
Where's that
where's that coming from?
Yeah, okay.
Which is where my spreadsheet comes into play, and I can add on to that, and these departments that don't, the harbor is a good example of it being a self-sufficient department based on the fees. But if we say have codes and planning where their fees do not fund their entire department, then that's when we can put that asterisk in and say, this is what will be coming from tax money, because obviously the fees don't support it.
But the harbor, so with the harbor, when they say, I've heard this from the harbor committee there's, oh, well, the harbor pays for itself, and the harbor brings in all this revenue. Yeah, it's the harbor, like, it should do a heck of a lot more than just pay the fees, like, pay the cost of the harbor. It's a massive asset to the town, and just covering the costs of the harbor, and I would argue really it doesn't necessarily. Sometimes I just, I think that there need to be some conversations about like with direction, like what what we're trying to, like how to set the fees, basically. Because it's been, everybody wants the fees to be low, but who is paying for that and.
Yeah, no, I think it's
we
like,
make
that's the
decisions.
fundamental question with like a budget is like, what are functions that should be fee for service, to what extent, and then what is something that's a shared responsibility that's raised through property taxes? And just, having a more in-depth discussion about that with the budget committee than we ever have before, because Chriso, you're right, often the revenue discussion is kind of like an afterthought at the end. It's like, oh, we've gone through every single line, expense line item, and then we're just gonna talk about revenues for like 10 minutes at the end, and everybody's gonna be like, oh yeah, that looks good.
We kind of sort of run out of time, and it's like, oh wait, revenues.
Oh yeah,
The bottom
remember
number
those.
is- Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
we gotta flag some things maybe that would be worth,
Mm-hmm.
things that we have artificially low, sort of less than the market will bear. And I'm not saying that I believe every single thing should just be as high as it possibly can be, but when we are,
we all know what the areas are where we need to take a
some
closer
people know and
look.
some people,
There should be transparency about the
right,
fact that it's a choice.
right.
That it's not there's not something inevitable about what the fee is being set at. It's been, so that, I think that's really the crux of it.
All right, well, that's really good feedback, because, I think when we first started doing the budget, the revenues were much, much lower, and there were many fewer. And so, it wasn't a long discussion, but things have changed over time. And I think that we both noticed, like, this is getting to be bigger and more complicated, and there's, revenue coming in from some of the special revenue funds to the general fund, and just how do we sort of map this all out for everybody, and how do we have policy level discussions about, areas where we need more input on what folks would like to see. So that's very helpful.
Like wastewater fees, we could be subsidizing that and keeping everybody's sewer bills lower, but the direction there has been there's a clear policy that, for operational costs of the wastewater treatment plant now, and actually everything, that's going to users, it's not subsidized by taxpayers, and your tax bill would be a heck of a lot higher. So that gives the staff and the select board and whoever else the fortitude when they get complaints from people with wastewater bills, like me, I say, yeah, I'll pay, we're gonna pay a little bit more, and it's not the taxpayers like doing that, and because you get complaints, it's hard to raise fees to what they should be. So to get town staff to suggest to raise a fee, they have to feel like they've been told to do that. Otherwise, when they do it, it's like they're being blamed for it, kind of. And their tendency is gonna be to not do it, and then we fall behind, and more has to be paid for by taxpayers.
All right, so the next thing I wanted to ask about were some of it's capital projects, and also, I think we talked a little bit about the Snow Bowl debt, or it's not even debt, the subsidy to the Snow Bowl. So the way that we've kind of approached this in the past couple of years, there's some distinct expenses that we've had sit outside of the budget. So, the groomer, the curtain wall for the Snow Bowl, and then the decision to subsidize the Snow Bowl, those kind of all sat separately from the general fund budget. And, there's a lot of benefits to doing it that way. People get to feel like they voted on it separately, and it's not, kind of embedded within the budget. So if people don't support that, they have to vote down the budget. Kind of the drawback to it is that, I think it's hard for people to understand what the tax impact of that is going to be if it's not kind of embedded in the budget at the same time. So just getting a sense from all of you how you'd like to approach that going into this year. And I know that you know, there isn't necessarily a hard, fast rule, you might wanna take it on a case-by-case basis, and we're small enough in what we do that we can do that. Just
Couldn't
want to
you
get.
show, couldn't you show what would happen to a tax bill by, let's say, every $1,000 worth of value, it's gonna raise, if we pass this thing for $500,000, this is going to add X% to the budget, or X% to your taxes? Wouldn't, you know, in that
Do the
little capital
budget,
statement?
We can't really do what the impact's gonna be on taxes, cause that's,
Why not?
because the assessed value factors so heavily into that, that it's,
But if you already know, if you just say, you know, it's just like the car ads that say it's, you know, $1 per thousand or whatever on your car lease, whatever it is in the fine print, I would think we should be able to add to say this will be the impact on average to your taxes, or, you know, for every $10,000 of valuation, this is gonna add $1 to your taxes.
We don't even do that for the full
I know,
budget, that could be
Could
a
we?
separate thing, but we could add, cause we do, you know, we put in the percentage increase for the overall budget, we
we
could
can
add,
absolutely do percentage increase.
percentage increase.
Yeah,
This will
the tax
add,
impact is
if we did
different.
this, this will add X% to the, I get it, sometimes the budget's like, they'll say $12 million, and we've got 4 things that we're going to add, and they're $500,000 a piece, but you can at least say this $500,000 thing is going to add X% to the $12 million. Is that,
Yes.
is that even, does that present to people a picture of the impact?
I think it would help a little.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you know, by law, whenever we're, presenting taxpayers with a, you know, with a bond or a
Yeah.
borrowing of any sort, we have to do that whole, Jody has to,
Treasurer's statement
yeah,
tells
yeah.
us what it would, yeah.
But it would be, you know, it would be nice, I think, to again add that little bit of perspective on, that's great, we got a snowcat, we got this, we got that, but damn, my taxes are high now.
Right, it's gonna add this to the percentage of the overall
But
budget.
they might not have, it's like, okay, yeah, I approved the $12 million budget, so why isn't it,
Right,
now,
you said that was
like-
a 6% increase, but now all of a sudden it's a
it's a
12%
20, I don't
increase
know,
because we
whatever.
voted to do all these other things on top of it.
Right,
So for these capital projects, how is it added into, using the snowball example, the cat, does that get added to the snowball budget in the following year? I mean, how?
the bond value though does, doesn't it, at
So
some point?
the cat was, we borrowed the money for that. So that was, you know, Jody did a treasurer's statement, and then you see it in subsequent years because of the way that, you know, the bonds work, like the schedule of when.
But if we bought $1 million fire truck, to keep it simple, whatever you can buy for $1 million, whatever it is. If you bought $1 million fire truck, do you break that over 30 years? Or do you
Yes.
break that over 5? So you can say,
30.
we're buying $1 million fire truck, it's going to only have this amount of impact, I don't know, add $10,000 to our overall taxes, but for 30 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. So for things that we borrow for, you know, we have that treasurer's statement talking about like, this is how much debt we have, this is how much will add to it, and, you know, this is the percentage rate that, like it's kind of like the range of, interest rates that we're gonna anticipate borrowing under.
Mhm.
When it's something like, subsidizing, you know, the vote to subsidize the snow bowl, we have every year when we're committing taxes, we have to fill out a spreadsheet where it has like the school's assessment, the county's assessment, and then a bunch of different aspects of the town. It's never as simple as like one number for the town. It's like, you know, what the budget is, what our revenues are, a bunch of different
State revenue sharing.
state revenue sharing, all of that.
Yeah.
And so when Jody and Carrie were preparing all of that, they had to add in the extra things that were voted on, like the subsidy to the snow bowl, into that, you know, overall budget figure for expenses in order to have,
'Cause that
you
was
know,
a
the
one-year
commit, when we
expense.
commit taxes for it to be.
1 year.
That was a
expense.
one-year expense in the $250,000 thing, but the $300,000 window, is that a capital project that was a bond issue over time, or was that something else? Just guess,
Hold on.
That might have been.
or is that like a 5-year, do you do like depreciation cycles over years? So you don't take that all in 1 year, or what?
I can't remember how we did that one.
Yeah, I don't remember how we did that.
That was a one-year thing.
It's just a-
Sometimes we ask if we should take money from the unassigned fund balance to.
Alright, well, maybe that was a bad example, I was just thinking of other big.
Well, it's not a bad example, because it's
No,
always
no,
like,
it's a
that,
good
it
example.
is, yeah.
There
Yeah,
are-
there's a lot of different ways this is done, so it's.
So it makes it a little hard to compare year after year, because one year there might be 3 specials, and the next year none, but that doesn't show up.
Right,
Right, but what we don't wanna have happen is that we have so much bond stuff, we can't buy a Band-Aid.
Right, which is why we keep track of our total
debt.
Total
So,
debt.
That was not that's obviously not financed, it was just, it was raised, it was appropriated.
Yeah, I think it was on
So
some.
there was no.
So it's a 1-year deal.
Yeah,
We could talk about the audit too, and, I mean, it's important to people to understand sort of the overall financial health of the town.
Where is
They're
it?
actually in very good shape.
Yeah,
Before we move on from that, you never answered Audra's original
Right.
question, so maybe we could go back to that.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Which one was that? Which question?
how do we wanna
How do we
show
wanna,
capital, I mean, where, like, if it's a bonded thing, is the debt service shown as a line item, or
it's,
So-
yeah,
we can show that that's what that impact on this year's, on any given year that we're paying off, that's a fairly easy thing to show. If it's a one-time pulling out of fund, that shows up also in that year's budget, and then it's a done deal. I mean, I think that we saw with the school budget, a year and a half ago, that a big brouhaha over one item in a grouping brought the whole thing down. And to me, pulling out the big projects and explaining them really well makes a lot of sense to say, hey, we're asking for an investment here and this is how it's going to get paid for. I think that's a good part of the conversation of saying, we're buying a new fire truck or a snowplow or whatever it is, and it's gonna be paid for this way. And that helps explain that, so to me, keeping those capital items out.
But the problem is, it looks like you're also hiding it from the total.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. So, I'm trying to brainstorm here. Chris is, if I understand, Chris, I'm Joe resident, and I wanna know, is this gonna cost me $10 a month next year, or $50? And we can't say that, because we don't know what the assessment is.
Right.
But we could say it for last year.
Yeah,
I think that could be a
And-
separate.
or we can say.
I know, it's very misleading.
I don't like doing that.
Yeah, it's very misleading because like, okay, but for me, it's like, it's gonna change a little bit, but not a lot. But at
Right.
least it gives me like a ballpark. Is it $100 a month or is it $10 a month? And I know finance people hate this because it's misleading and, but for the general public, it's sort of like, I'm just trying to feel this out a little bit and I can't tell. What's the impact to me, right? Yeah. And so there's gotta be, you could say like, based on 2026 budgeting, this would have impacted per $10,000 of assessment, it would have been $2.50 or something like that. Because we have those numbers and it's
Right.
super easy.
Yeah.
It's just going forward when you don't know, it makes it really hard.
well, we didn't know that.
I think that that's really valuable, actually for everything in the budget, to have like a little cheat sheet on the side that you can know that, okay, if you raise the, net impact to taxpayers by $100,000, it does this, and that, if your house is worth, this much, then this is the.
$100,000.
I've seen that done a few times as like a separate thing during the budget committee time, so you can keep the perspective, I don't see why we would do that just for the fire truck or just for the groomer. I mean, you can make
Those
the
are
argument to
add-ons.
pull all of these things out. And sometimes it makes sense. I think what we've done, most of the reason for that to happen most of the time is a failure, it's like the select board, not wanting to make a choice. And it's easier to be like, oh, we'll just let the voters decide. But it's also not really fair because some of these things, it's a mix of things like that have a choice and don't have a choice. I mean, the decision to cover the deficit at the snowball is like, at some point, there's not a choice. Like, the town's gonna have to make up if the snowball stays in the red, we will have to pay for that. They don't really have a choice about that in the long run, so I tend to think it's more, we should only pull things out that really are like totally separate choices.
So
that
it's a sort of,
the town can continue along without doing it. You can decide whether to build a new lodge or not build a new lodge. Sometimes when it's a groomer, or I feel like I've been a little bit weak sometimes, like thinking, oh, I don't really want to add all this to the budget. Okay, but I'm not gonna vote to paralyze the snowball, so I'm gonna let voters decide. I know what they're gonna decide, and we can be removed from the.
so is a happy compromise where we have, I mean, I'm thinking, in the days when we were still doing votes actually in town meeting of who showed up, a group could say, I wanna pull this out of the budget, and I mean, not in Camden, but when I lived in New Gloucester, there was a decision to buy a new excavator.
Right.
And a group of people said, we don't think that town crew should have a brand new excavator, and we don't wanna pay for it, and they voted it down.
That's right.
We don't have that option unless certain things are put. So I think is there a happy medium that what the warrant item gets is if it's something that is a bigger item that has its own separate narrative that says, a groomer, this project is included and this is how it's getting funded, and it's all one vote, so that we do have the bottom line all agreed on, and then sort of case by case periodically if it's.
So is there no policy that guides this decision in terms of like what gets pulled out and what doesn't?
I mean, like
That to me is
like
kind
a
of like
dollar
the first question
amount,
is like,
like a dollar
is there
amount.
any
It used to
rule?
be that like every single thing, like you look at town meeting from like 1900, and there was like 10 pages of like, shall we put the stoplight here? Shall we do this?
So everything is its own.
And now it's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, and I guess
should
just
be
to
all in the budget mostly.
ease everybody, like, there aren't a lot of these, so like
Yeah.
anything that we need to bond, we need to prepare a treasurer's note for, and people need to be able to see that and vote on that separately. So it's really only been a few of these items that we've self-funded, self-financed, or subsidized through the general fund. So
The
it's,
unassigned fund balance.
There might be.
right, unassigned fund balance.
Is there a way to contextualize some elements of the budget as well into, this is a legal requirement, we have to do this, or this is a thing that we have to do, not because it's legal, but we're gonna continue to pay people, and these are the nice to haves. Is there a way to contextualize that in any way? I mean, like, for example, oh, I wanna put monkey bars up the snow bowl, that's a nice to have, maybe not even. But, it's an incremental item, as compared with, oh, we have to pay licenses and registration fees or health insurance or something like that. Is there any way to contextualize that range in
I
three
think
buckets?
it's already happening though in the budget, we really just have, in the operating budget, it's the necessities, in my opinion. There's not a lot of,
It's really the snowball,
Nice to
I mean,
have.
it's what we've done, it's the last couple of years, it's been a substantial amount of money tacked onto the end of the budget, and I think we just wanna, it's good to do that every few years to kind of gauge, like, are people still supportive of doing this for the snowball, I think? But, you know, then we get a chance to know, like, okay, should we be really reeling in the snowball or not? Well, let's know what the voters decide.
I know. Sort of to understand and clarify in what, that you brought up in the beginning, in terms of talking just about all the different aspects and what's going in, and sort of whittling down the budget, so we're hopefully not, it's just not increasing. When does that hard conversation happen generally? Like, because we're talking about the snowball, like when does it happen where it's like, no, we're not gonna fund the Opera House anymore? Nope, we're not gonna subsidize the snowball anymore. Like when and how do those conversations happen? Do they happen in the budget room?
Where's
Do they
that
happen at a
schedule
select
again?
board?
I think
I mean, is it like, are we allowed to bring that
Oh,
up?
yeah.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, to speak your, that's why we want as many people as we can get on the budget committee,
So
so
why do you
that they
bring
can
it
say, hey, I don't like that we spend money on garbage trucks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't.
I don't know, whatever it is.
So why did it switch from 21 down to 11? Or when did
Well,
that
was
that
the
was
charter
done by the
commission.
charter committee. I was dead set against what they were doing. I never had any problem finding people for the budget
I
committee.
totally
I would
agree.
just go up to Hannaford and walk the halls and say, hey. And
I just put stuff on Facebook.
And it happened. Yeah. The people on the charter committee, some of the people said, well, not enough people show up. Yeah, they do.
My
Yeah,
first,
they
they had, there were some people on the charter commission that they'd been on, there used to be a budget
The budget
nominating.
nominating.
And those people did have trouble finding people, and so that's why they got rid of the
They
term
just didn't
limits
know
for
anything.
they just wanted to recycle the same small group, because they
just
were having so
never
much
went to
trouble.
Hannaford.
But I was like, I can get you people, they might, you know, so sometimes they quit, you start with 28, and then a few get to the budget committee and they're like, whoa, this is not what I wanna do, and they don't show up, and.
When you look at the history of the budget committee back, when I first started, it was a couple of years after I moved here in '79. So it was the early '80s. There were 28 people, and there were names you would have known, there were faces you would have known easily. And they had very healthy discussions, not just amongst themselves, but also with the presenters, like the fire department and the police department. And then the budget decision would go to the select board, and if the presenters, if the presenters were shot down by the budget committee, they'd make another presentation to the select board. So you had a number that the select board chose and a number that the budget committee chose. And that's when the budget committee started losing people, because they felt the select board wasn't cooperating or paying attention. So when I was chair of the select board, I said, okay, guys, we're gonna show up at the budget committee, and we're gonna sit at the back of the room, and we're gonna listen to the presentations that the budget committee gives. Everything changed right like that, just like that.
And what changed?
What changed?
There was no more contention or
Second
disagreement.
guessing.
Well, that returned a few
The
years
second
later.
guessing, yeah.
It was back, I mean, also, the budget committee used to be,
Now, when the budget goes to the voters, both decisions aren't shown on the,
yes, they are.
yeah.
It's not, I don't know if people know what to do with them, because it's kind of a,
They're both shown, but the select board line is the one that they vote on.
Yeah,
I mean, at the
so
budget.
it's not the same as it used to be, where
No.
the select board, you vote for the select board, or you voted for the budget
Or you
committee.
voted for something totally different, that 7 people, at town meeting showed up and had a coup, and, so, I mean, it used to be that the budget committee was meant to be the entire public input process for the whole town. That's how they got public input, because you couldn't just, go on the internet or, it worked really well for some, and then like the vast majority of Camden residents never got any input.
Because they didn't show up.
A
That's all
town
now.
meeting, which was like on a school night. But, so, it worked great for some, I agree with you, there are good things and bad things, but the other thing that happens at the end of all this is we felt like we've all talked about it with the select board and the budget committee, but then the public comes to this public hearing at the end, and occasionally they're like ready to give their input, and we're like, oh, we're finished.
We all do.
Right, so,
Yeah.
so we really need to broadcast the Thursday, March 26th, no time meeting.
Yes, that
To
would be
say,
good.
if, you know, if we've got people that want to come.
And even maybe
This
put
is-
it in a place where you could have more people than,
Public comment.
you know, that you.
Or allow
expect.
people to, yeah, and I think there's like a few people that might show up if you tell them that they, you know, the public's invited to the budget committee meetings too.
But you're
Still,
right,
you're,
right.
it's a tiny fraction, overall, getting to the point where we're providing more meaningful opportunities for the whole town to weigh in, not just by showing what they think by voting the budget down or not, but by saying, hey, if you wanna send an email during this period of time, or ideally, we would actually do surveys where we'd ask people, you know, meaningful questions and out to the community, and then the budget committee could be like, oh, look at that, 70% of people, you know, don't
I
wanna.
don't think we should go too far overboard on this, because I have seen that people in this town really don't care unless it's something specific. 3 times I have seen town meeting where there were more people in that room that were allowed. It was over 500 people in
What
the
was,
room.
what was the big contention?
One was Tom Miller's roof. I don't know if you knew about that.
No,
On the harbor, and
The building
he
is
bought
already
a little,
unplugged.
he bought a little cabin and he went whoop like this, and a few people really objected, filled the room. Another one was, when we wanted to put a, fire escape over the little buildings next to us.
Mhm.
And the people that own those buildings said, that's our airspace, you can't do that. So that filled the room.
Okay,
And then the third one was whether or not the town was gonna give money to the Baptist church to put the town
The
clock
And the bird
in the
feeding,
steeple.
that was also the year of the bird feeding ordinance.
Ah.
But people, that's when people show up when they're like really
They care.
upset about something.
Well, they care.
But the majority of Camden residents, a lot of them have really good, thoughtful input but non-passionate input. Like they'll say, oh no, I think this is going pretty well, I'd like the town to focus on, you know, doing things in a more environmentally friendly way, I'd like the roads to be better. They have meaningful input, they just don't have burn down the town input. So
No,
I think
I
we
disagree.
don't provide opportunities for people just to give like general input that can be used broadly.
well, in
Yeah,
the
I
meeting,
disagree, because when we used to have town meeting,
But people
we'd
don't
have
a town meeting.
we'd have about 80 to 100 people show up.
Mhm.
I was up on the stage, this woman walks up and says, what are you doing? What are you doing here? I said, town meeting. She said, I don't understand, what are you doing? She didn't come from New England.
Oh.
New England is the only
I
place
came
in.
from New England, and I went to my first town meeting, it felt like Catholic mass or something, you look around, and half the people are voting, and they have no idea what they're voting on, they look at their neighbors, it's like, what the heck is this? Nobody knows what's
I don't
going
know what
on.
town that
So
was.
it was here,
It was here, and I had the same experience, and I grew up here.
Right.
Same thing, no idea about this
I never
process.
saw that happen, but I had to explain
You
to
never
the
saw what
woman
happened.
what
People
town
didn't
meeting
know that.
was and what the power she had in her hand that night, and she was totally surprised.
are the only,
overwhelming and scary, and
or is it a plural or singular verb on times for the public to attend or go to these, besides looking on the web? I see it's only noted as receive public comments once kind of the turkey's done on the 26th. What about those other 3 meetings leading up to that? Is the public not invited to speak?
All the public is invited to every single meeting that the town.
So
we should
should we,
say that explicitly.
so should we
Yeah.
explicitly
Well-
add that to the agenda item? You know, we have the list, and only the last one says, and receive public comments.
We've
The other
had
ones
people speak
don't.
before at budget committee meetings.
I know that. What I'm talking about is the way the agenda is currently printed.
Sort of like the select board, it says public comment right at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah, if there is a public comment, just, you know, like it says, I receive public comments. Right now,
Put it
when I
right
read
at the
this,
beginning too.
it only happens at the end, at the very end. It's the last
I
one.
mean, with the best intent, I mean, I think, sort of to Karen's point, like, when people get fired up about something is when it's something they've been told about that they don't like.
Mhm.
And we saw that with marijuana, it's often more about policies than money. And I think the reality is, yeah, we say all of these meetings, select board, budget committee, all of these things are open to the public. A lot more people watch them, a lot more people are watching online than we think, and they are paying attention, and most of them sort of look at it and go, okay,
Right.
fine, okay. And you have a small group who will object and, but there is a trust of town staff who know their budgets, budget committee who know process and review and go through it to say, and if there's something, like occasionally, and to go back to how do we show some of the bigger items, most of the budget is pretty much straightforward, as much as people say, oh my God, it's grown this much, well, the world is more expensive, so I think trying to get obsessed on how do we get more public participation in that process is not a bad effort, but I think we're doing the best we can, and
I'm wondering if we couldn't approach, Midcoast Villager and Penn Bay Pilot and ask them to do a weekly update prior to the meeting, so that they have 4 different updates on what's going on and what's gonna be there and who's gonna be presenting and all of that. Just because I think a lot more people pay attention to those two than they watch over your shoulder.
well, to that point, actually, even just in what we send on the town's email and text message, like often it just says the budget committee is meeting on the Thursday. It doesn't say what areas of the budget they're talking about. So if somebody has a specific thing to know which of those meetings they're gonna be talking about, my hot topic, and then put it in the Villager, and
And to let people have, a lot of people might just have one question that they'd like to have asked, so I think it's all of our job, partially, first of all, just to like talk to people and try to bring all of that input from the community, but also to give people the opportunity to just send a question somewhere. Telling people they have to come to a meeting in order to give input is just a really unfair bar. But if there's a way, we have our select board email that people use, but if there's just a general way that people can, this is the right way to ask a question about the budget, and maybe that question will get asked during the presentation by a budget committee member, I think would be nice for people to be able to do.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but in looking at, again, on those topics and what might get public input, that's also something else to think about in the way these meetings are structured. Because there might be one that might be more talked about than others. And longer.
I'm feeling 2
As a
hours is
result.
not gonna be enough time this year for some reason. I'm like,
I mean, some things, you just have to, think about some of those things that are going to maybe be a bigger influence or change.
But really, it should be this group, I mean, we put people on these committees to be having those in-depth conversations
Right,
and
but
to be,
just to structure the agendas by those that, okay, I think, for example, I don't know, I might be wrong, but in the infrastructure piece, many of those projects have been talked about for a while, so there's not going to be, I don't think, substantive change going on there. Or maybe there isn't substantive change going on in this coming year at Snowball. I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, I don't know. But whatever it is, if there is, like Opera House, probably not, Maybe that's an item.
If Courtney has anything to do with that.
Because we had, we already did the heating and ventilating and the roof and other things that we had to do there. Just
Leave more time for some of those things that we are gonna need to talk about.
because especially if there is public invited to, and people know, oh, we're going to be talking about the harbor in the March 12th meeting. And so that people who are interested in that might show up.
well, and to Allison's point, to identify the harder stuff.
Yeah, the hard
The
stuff.
bigger, meatier stuff is, what is it, Stephen Covey's you know,
Yeah,
hard things first.
right.
And it's, you know, and I think Jody and Caldera, you guys can identify what some of those, you know, where are the, like, yes, this year there are gonna be some bigger fee changes in some departments because we've been pushing to have them come up. Is that gonna be contentious? I don't know. But where those things are easily identified of what's gonna be tougher, give that. And I think from, you know, from watching budget committee meetings, it's always sort of like, wow, we just spent an hour and 20 minutes on one thing and we've got 5 things left tonight.
On a $50,000 tree, that was one of those.
And so sort of pacing those meetings a little more.
And maybe flagging some things that, sometimes things come up where you realize, wow, people just really, really wanna talk about whether it's better to put sand on the roads or salt. And we could maybe have a little thing about that, but not, you know, not have everybody's pet issue fit into the budget committee discussion, but like, okay, we'll do another thing where we all go out to the snowball and we walk around and point out what's broken and,
Stop picking on the snowball, gee.
Well, regarding participation, my impression, or I think it was a policy in the past that, or last year, that the select board was not welcome to address the
Right.
budget committee.
That's what I remember.
We had a silent audience.
Yeah, silent, you couldn't participate, but
That was a vote.
but we were expected to observe.
that way you wouldn't get these two different presentations from one person.
Wait, that,
What?
what was the reason?
No, it
I
winds up
never really
having two different
understood the
discussions you have.
What's that?
The select board.
I think it was so that the select board didn't dominate the conversations.
Yeah, I agree with that, but
Which,
But
if you notice how many
also-
people are talking here? Primarily.
Selectively.
I mean, I sat through a lot of
I
them.
feel like, Ken, did you have more to say about that?
no, well, I think that we went overboard. I think that the process would have benefited by on-the-spot response from the select board, rather than
Yeah.
the select board, you know, setting it aside and coming in the select board meeting and covering that information.
Wasn't there a back door through
There
Audra
was.
somehow?
There
I
was.
think
Yeah,
there was.
yeah,
I mean, can I
We
just say,
can reel ourselves in a little bit, it's like,
as the people who are kind of like trying to keep track of everything and make sure that everybody gets input and then the select board has enough time to review but I just feel like it's been very limiting to the detriment of everyone to be like blanket select board can't speak at all. Cause I do think there are times when it's like a policy level question that I can't answer, because it's like, well, what does the select board wanna do about this in the coming year? I'm not in a great position to speak on behalf of the select board about some of these things, so, I mean, having the 5 of them in the room, they can answer that question pretty easily. And I think there are other times where select board members might have like just a simple, quick question that would help them, would help the process moving forward. So I think if
because
everyone
the
could
department heads
consider.
don't present to us.
Right, yeah, if everyone could consider sort of loosening that up a
We don't
little
even
bit.
get to.
I think it would be more helpful to everyone, budget committee and select board,
Right.
if there was just a little relaxation of that.
Well, it could be just, you know, be recognized by the chair and you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't wanna participate as much in the actual meetings as I am. I appreciate the organizational meeting, cause when you've had to sit there and, yeah, you have strong opinions too, and I'm not gonna, and I know you felt very strongly, you didn't want this, and I like you, and we both feel comfortable sharing our opinion, but I know that it was you that really felt strongly with the select board not participate.
That's right.
But I just think that has been very detrimental, because it limits the quality of the final recommendation. And if you don't, if there's been a strong argument from, say, a few select board members for doing something or not doing something, and that has been a driving factor in why we've chosen to do something or not, just eliminating that from the conversation means, it doesn't eliminate that as a factor in the decision-making later. It just means that you're having an incomplete conversation
Well,
here.
you have your conversation separately after we're finished.
But what
Well, but
happens
sometimes-
then?
You just
sometimes
saying that we're
it's-
supposed to have the policy discussions in the budget committee meetings?
Right.
So if we're supposed to have the policy discussions in the budget committee meetings, we have to have the select board be part of the policy discussions, don't we?
Hey, at least
You have a
the
much-
gymnastics
Yeah.
scorecard or something.
I mean, in the last couple of years, and last year in particular, it felt like that last session where the board was reviewing that there were a lot of questions that were asked that could have been very quickly answered in the process, like 2 meetings prior to that final
Mhm.
session, thus that last session becomes a really, like, it ended up being 2 meetings because
Mhm.
of such a hard firewall between the two in the month previous. So having some component of allowing select board members as citizens to ask questions and not run the room, Jeff.
You get one of those chess timer things, however those work, to make sure.
You know, and
We only have so much time, sorry.
yeah, to be the, you know, what is, I mean, you know, when we're liaisons to any of these committees, the question is always, what does the select board want us? What is the feeling of the select board? And it can't be staff who's making that decision, because it's trying to read our minds. And we don't even know sometimes, so.
Right, because we can't speak for, we're individuals,
Right.
you know, we don't have a consensus about, oh, well, the select board wishes that.
The hive mind that is the select board.
So as it stands now, from last year, you guys weren't, I was
Mhm.
not there for the full thing, you guys weren't allowed to say anything. But the previous year, you were,
Mhm.
it was just last year, so what are we going into now this year? Does it have to be a vote on, from the budget people, when we have our first meeting, to be like, yes, we want you there, no, we don't want you there? Or is it happening now?
It's kind of like a rule of order thing that you all
When
do
the
every
budget
year.
But
starts?
Adopted
Yeah,
process.
besides, okay.
I mean,
I'm really trying to learn these.
it's,
Oh.
I mean,
still saying it's
there's no,
Even if
we
you
make
learn it
all
for
the
this
rules.
year, it could be completely different next year.
There is no, most of it is just like, there are some rules that are in the charter somewhere, or whatever, but most of this stuff is just created by the humans that are participating in it. And when I started, there was a period where, when I was in the budget committee, the select board didn't speak, and they would watch, and then at the end, they would all do their own thing in a workshop that wasn't even filmed, and they would, and it was like really upsetting. And then there were a few times when they would participate. I personally really liked that when they did participate. I can obviously see how it would get too much, but you don't have to vote on any of this. They started voting one year about not having the select board participate.
That might be, like, to the agenda's point, we've got, somehow we went over point 3, and we went to capital projects point 4, which was budget process. I think we spoke about budget basics already, but we're probably on the roles and responsibilities item that you had listed there, item B, and that might help out some folks. There are arrows there, and maybe that just means it goes from the staff to the budget committee to the select board. And then, I don't know what option C is on levels of service, what the intended agenda item was there. I don't think we talked about it though. Let me know if we have.
Again, just a general discussion prompt. But yeah, no, the whole roles and responsibilities, I was hoping that you'd get to this conversation and everybody could talk about, you know, the select board and the budget committee, and just just having that be a little more flexible, I think is gonna be best for everybody, and it's gonna save time, and it's gonna make the select board's deliberation much more informed, and also everybody much less sort of desperately crunched for time.
What does the charter say?
Nothing about that.
Nothing?
Nope.
Okay.
Because it would be a shame if the chief has to make the same presentation twice. I mean, whatever we can do to eliminate that from happening, unless it has to happen because the public needs to hear it. But I'd rather not
Right. And when we get to
have
the end, where
those
it's like,
twice. So they shouldn't have to make the same presentation twice.
Well, that's why the select board was asked to sit in on the budget committee meeting, so that they didn't have to make that
we
twice.
just have to remember our questions for weeks later and then
That's the
call
point we're
in the
trying to
department
get
head. I
beyond
had a
that.
question about Chief Farley's, whatever, it's
Yeah.
better if we can arrive at a recommendation to the voters that is meaningful. What was happening before, when you look at the categories at the end, you couldn't say, well, the select board thought we should spend less on public works and the budget committee thought more. The bottom line, the decisions that the select board made were so small that they ended up being invisible in bottom lines because we would add a little bit here and take a little bit away there and then use a little bit of the unassigned fund balance. So a voter is gonna look and say, oh, well, this looks like the select board brought down the total expenses or the total cost of taxpayers. Well, no, we didn't really. We voted to use more of the unassigned fund balance, and it wasn't, when that conversation is happening all in a vacuum, it makes it look like we disagree in places where we
So
don't.
you're saying if it doesn't go to the select board, if you're part of the participation with the budget committee, if the final decisions are made right then and there, and it doesn't go to the select board later?
No,
Oh,
it
it does,
still
it
will,
does.
but it provides more of a,
It is somewhat of a good point, but to give primarily the public, maybe there's something we really didn't agree on, but we're not gonna have a fist fight during the budget committee. You might wanna know how.
but I mean, we
Well, I
get,
think it's.
I don't have
think
much
it's-
reach, that's why.
The way I see this is that it's, there's really little point in inviting the select board to sit in on meetings if we can't occasionally ask a question. And that's to me, the idea is that if we would be there, we're not the dominant part of but just like any citizen has the ability to attend a meeting and ask a short question, clarifying anything, and not be part of the broader big discussion, and then it comes to the select board, who have had their questions answered in that short term and had time to review the whole thing. And that to me is like, like,
What if we reserved discussion time that was budget committee discussion time? Although there isn't enough time in these jam-packed meetings, so I'm not sure if that helps.
I
Yeah, they
don't
kinda
see
go
myself
together.
asking as many, commenting as much in the actual meetings as, like, it's tiring anyway. It's just the hard line prohibition is just unreasonable. The members of the public can come and ask a question, but we can't, and we just have to sit here in silence and listen. We all have a lot of stuff going on. So just to be able to say, oh, I wanna ask my question about I was gonna say this closing date of the snowball, but I'm not, like, that's all I really anticipate doing, is just the occasional question and mostly being interested in what the budget committee has to say. I think it's just occasionally when we think that there might be something that's really not being talked about or just totally being missed, we might say, hey, have you thought about this?
I mean, a lot of the questions I have going through watching are a lot of it is some of it is process, is sort of, where does that show up on a line item, where does that, they're not big broad policy questions, and it's sort of, if that question can be asked during a budget committee meeting, then we don't have to devote 10 minutes of that to the final deliberation.
Well, I don't have a problem if people wanna ask, if the select board wants to ask a question, but when they infuse themselves into the budget committee
Yeah.
meeting with a debate issue, I think that's,
Mhm.
you might as well send the budget committee home and do it yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
We agree.
Yeah, I think it's really really important to be clear about what the process is. Like, at what point do the deliberations become the budget committee's deliberations and decision-making, which isn't really in here. So I think we need to put it in the schedule, because what we've got is department presentations and like review of the information. And then we've got a joint public meeting to receive public comments, but it's not actually written in and I think that the way it worked last year was we were expected to be making decisions about department budgets on the night that they were presented to us. I don't necessarily know whether that's the
So-
best way to go about it, but I see that it might be the efficient way to go, and maybe it does make sense because it's all fresh in your mind. But in any event, I think we need to actually put in the schedule, when does the budget committee deliberate and decide?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that,
You know,
Well, to that point, we were, at the very beginning, when we were looking at that schedule, we were talking about the final thing for the select would be at a select board. So is that, just looking at the calendar, first Tuesday in April is the 7th. Is that when we're imagining the select board
Yes.
will have its,
Yeah, that's when
hopefully
you,
one evening of deliberation on the budget?
but that should be added to the schedule.
That's why I'm throwing, like, to Marina's point of like,
Yeah.
you have to put, like, where's their deliberation, where's our,
Yeah, and it, yeah, like it does say, you know, review, you might as well say it's review and determine, decide,
and
whatever the
decide,
word
right,
is.
whatever the, yeah,
But put that right in there. I'm a fan of having the agendas be pretty specific.
be specific.
And that way it's included and maybe not forgotten about,
Mhm.
as well as if it can inform people of what the hell really goes on.
Right,
well, you could have a budget committee meeting on the 19th.
well, I was wondering that, I mean, maybe that's that missing
Oh, I
Thursday.
see, yeah.
Maybe that's the missing Thursday.
I emailed Janice about that when that email first came, when it first came out to us, and I said, you know that you're missing a date? She's like, oh, I must have just forgotten about it. So I don't know if that means, I think that's, I mean, I can go through and look, but so I think there's meant to be one, it just, for whatever reason, didn't get added in on
It
there.
usually doesn't start until March. There's supposed to be, there are 4 meetings and it starts in March, not in
I think we
February.
started earlier because we wasted so much time, like, doing all the preliminary stuff, that it took away from the actual, like, 4 days that we had to go over the entire budget, so we started it a little bit earlier, going over basic things.
I mean,
That's why I remember it happening.
I think that's why we started in February, to give us extra time. But now, we gotta put in March 19th.
Yep.
Conversations completely.
Could be the pathways meeting, but we can change that. That's why the
Yeah.
Well, it might be.
No, you're
I
right,
mean,
that might be
it's-
why.
Might be why.
the pathways
Yeah.
meeting?
Or spread
It's
out,
on the 19th.
That shouldn't be,
but spread out
Just saying.
the,
you guys are supposed to meet on Wednesdays anyway.
you might wanna spread out the topics then to cover 5 weeks of
Yeah.
topics instead of 4 weeks of topics.
Yep.
We should leave them wide open, so if something runs over, we haven't, because there's always, we
Right.
always run over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just pushes everything down, or back behind, and then at the end, we're scrambling to try to get everything done, so maybe it is nice to have an open day where it's like, oh. I mean, I just hate for everybody, I mean, there were multiple times too where I think, Dave, had come.
Yeah.
Both days, and like we're sitting and waiting for his turn, and he never got his turn, and then he had to come back to the next one, and he didn't get to speak at that one either, so. I know, it can be, you know, I just felt really
The
bad.
fire department was such a,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think it's, even if that isn't there, maybe there, it is nice to have an open.
Keep that date and you guys decide how you're gonna
Yeah.
use that March 19th to
I'm
where
sure
you
we'll
need.
get you, yeah.
But in the process, you'd be able to say, hey, these are the things that we really need to take some more time with. Use that date.
the other thing that is good for everybody to just remember a little bit is that this is, like a lot of the town staff, you know, are listening to all of this, and they, you know, the input that they get from the public is kind of like, a lot of it's complaint-based, and so the experience of the budget committee and the types of questions, I know this is really true for the select board, and I've been told many times that I really demoralized somebody or hurt somebody's feelings, very much not realizing that I was doing it, and so I think just thinking about how the conversation happens and what that, not that hard questions can't or shouldn't be asked, but just that lots of people are listening, and that the budget really does like set the tone for everything that happens in the year. It's our most important policy document, everything's in the budget, and that's kind of how the town staff evaluate sort of how they feel about their job, how they think the public feels, and just a good thing to keep in mind as it's going along. Because sometimes we get to the end and people really feel like, really don't feel good, and
And that goes to the item C, that the levels of service, like that's the thing that at the end of the day, we're really, the people who come and expect certain levels of service, and we've hired staff who provide that level and do a very good job, so we don't wanna undermine them.
Right,
And-
yeah. People feeling good about their job usually makes them do better. They don't usually do better when they just get dragged through the mud in public. I don't think any of the problem people are here tonight anyway. I was
gonna say, I can't
Yeah.
think of this room
Yeah.
that publicly dragging.
Yeah.
What other items haven't we already discussed that we need to tonight?
I feel like we have some really great direction,
Yeah.
like really, really good direction. Is there, is there anything else that we didn't cover that any of you would like to make sure that we?
I just had a question, sort of recapping what I had heard earlier. You were talking about the revenues versus, cost of things.
Yeah.
Did you say last year, because I don't remember any of that, was it like we had expenditures and then but it was on the same page?
Yeah, and it was right behind the sort of main expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
It was in each department had its own,
Had its own thing right next to it.
showing
Yeah.
what revenues affected that department.
I like the
Yeah,
idea, I
I
think it
can
was Chris that said it
Maybe we
was
should
like,
stick it in the front and then
Yeah.
the detail.
And maybe a different
Yeah.
color sheet of paper or something just to,
so like each department has its own, if it has revenue,
If it
it has
has
a
it,
sheet like right behind it or whatever.
Yeah.
And is there a way, like, whatever, like he had said about like making a key or something? I was thinking about it when you were saying it like a map, almost like this triangle means this and this asterisk means this or whatever, so if it
as
is
far as
on
how
a
it's
separate.
funded and.
Yeah.
We could do
I
like,
just like that
stuff
idea.
that comes from fees for service,
Yeah.
stuff that comes
Yeah.
from like other
TIPS
special
or
revenue
something,
funds and, yeah.
Is there any new people on, the budget this year that you know of that haven't been on it? I was just thinking, like, remembering back to my first year and I was like, what the heck do all of these things mean? And it would, I don't remember there being one, but I think it would have been really nice to have some sort of glossary to be like, this is what this means and this is what this means. I mean, I was doing it kind of as we went along, but I felt,
Yeah, like the jargon.
yeah, like, yeah,
TIF.
what is, right, and what is it used for? And,
Yeah.
who is it benefiting or whatever?
We need a little AI bot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Translator.
I have one question, to go back just for a moment to this, and I hadn't really noticed the levels of service on your agenda here, so I'm just curious what were you thinking about in adding that here? Because without getting into a big thing, that's obviously a big policy area. So I am kind of curious, how does it factor into the budget process? That's something we do want broad public input on. And there was like a moment in the process last year where there was a question asked and the response was kind of like, well, that's how it's been since as long as I can remember. Well, okay, but that's not a policy choice, So, I'm really interested in that conversation, and so I'm just curious why it's on here.
Yeah, I see that as the budget committee's like fundamental role is giving us input on what do you want in terms of levels of service, where are areas where, you feel like there's a desire for a higher level of service, like.
You might decide that you want, the snowball should be free for everybody.
Let's get away from snowball.
I was gonna say,
Snow plower.
I was gonna say,
Plow,
yeah,
maybe.
do you want the roads plowed once a day during the snowstorm, or continuously?
Right, you want the
Right,
sidewalk
okay,
cleared
so
all the way
like
to the
some
skate
input
park.
that I got from a community member after we had those,
Yeah.
those weekend storms that were at night. They came in and were very disappointed that the snow was mounted up in the 5 and Dime parking lot. And I explained to them, I'm like, our crews have to go home and sleep because, these are overnight, they've been plowing for 48 hours straight, they need to go home and sleep. And this gentleman asked, well, why can't you get like a private contractor to come in and remove the snow? And I said, well, we don't budget for that, it would be very expensive because a lot of those folks are plowing smaller towns, private residences, whatever the case may be. But hey, that's like
Right.
hey,
that's
budget
Right.
committee, do you want that like poof pile of snow to disappear, or what's the tolerance level? You know, we hear about, you know, like sidewalks is another one, and when, you know, when they get done in the sequence of it, and, you know, again,
Bottom of the sidewalk all the way to the snow bowl.
yeah, you know, so it might be stuff like that, or there might be another service that we provide that everyone's like, hey, you know, that was good for the last 250 years of the town's existence, but looking forward to the next 250 years,
Right.
maybe that's not what we wanna keep doing, so, you know,
Reminders for the registration, you guys decided that was too much
Yeah,
of a burden,
yeah.
like to send out the reminder for everybody when their car needed to be registered, and, you know, turns out the cost of providing that service was like more than,
oh, and we would
Yeah.
get so
And
many
a few
irate
people-
people who were like, my reminder card came in late, so my registration was late.
Don't you know how to do that? I'm always late, regardless, so that's on me, that's my responsibility.
So yeah, I mean, those are all the kinds of things that it's really, really helpful.
the license plates.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Gotta put it
Dog
in.
reminder.
Oh,
The state
Yeah.
will send you a reminder too if you just sign up for it.
So anyway, yeah, I see that as sort of like everyone's fundamental job to be like, hey, this is, you know, I think that this is one area where, you know, we could do a better job, and so maybe we need to add some stuff here, or this is an area where it doesn't really fit with what we need, so we can cut some stuff from there. So I think that that's, for us, that's the most, that's like gold, getting that kind of feedback.
So that could happen throughout each department discussion.
Oh,
It should- it's
absolutely.
supposed to.
Actually, they
It
should.
should be happening.
Absolutely.
Well, even, I mean, the hours of the town office.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very good
Prime
idea.
example,
Perfect.
just,
Right.
and everyone's fine, but that changed.
I'm not.
Almost,
Audrey, would you include that in your overview? I think that would be a good thing to include in the overview.
Yes.
Identifying, sometimes like, you know, if you really wanted to save a lot of money, here's something we could do that would save a lot of money.
Yep.
Sometimes
Whether they
just to
like it or
have
not.
that,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's really hard to know what actually makes a difference sometimes unless you point it out, like, this is a choice we've been making, do you wanna continue to do that, or?
I remember we had talked one time, I think they were asking for bikes or something, the police were, for doing things, and it was a very small amount in comparison to bigger things that we were talking about, but it was such, I remember being a very long discussion, and it really wouldn't have made that much difference per resident, it would have been like probably pennies, maybe $20, I don't know, but the big things, it's like they've always seemed very off limits in the past. It's like, we've gotta be doing something because everybody's upset about taxes going up, but it's like, in order to actually make a dent and make a difference, you have to be looking at the big things, and that's the only way that we're gonna be able to do it, so I'm like, I'm looking forward.
Or we're not, and people need to
Right.
understand that, like, without changing any of these fundamental, you know,
Right.
things,
You've chosen-
you're not really gonna make a dent in your tax picture, you know?
Which comes
So
with the level
do you
of
wanna do
service.
this, do you wanna axe this, I mean,
And you-
people need to understand.
and you've chosen to live in a
Yeah.
town that does have a higher level of service
Right.
than many towns in this area, and there's a cost to that.
Right.
And
We are just so much better than so many other towns, though, I mean, the increase in Camden to taxpayers is just, over the last 5 or 10 years, is so much less than in.
Rockport.
Well, yeah, I wasn't gonna go
Not
there.
name names,
Way to go.
But it had
We
to
made
say
it
it.
all the way to this point.
I couldn't hold back.
There have been some really smart things that
She
have
lives
done.
there, so she gets to.
Oh, that's right.
That's the one there.
All right.
Because Rockport doesn't have the revenue, some of it is because they don't have the revenue. And there's some other.
We don't need to
reasons,
go
but
there.
Yeah,
TIF, you know,
that's-
We
TIF
don't need to
funding
go there.
is
We
a
don't
really
need to go
big,
there.
Let's stay with Camden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's-
we don't
But-
need to go there, please.
it's just that it's important to realize, even though things have gone up in Camden, that there have been a lot of really good decisions made in the past, not that I've made, but like really good planning from TIF districts and that type of planning that we pay for people to do makes a really big difference. I mean, we have this $1 million a year basically in TIF funding that goes to projects that people have voters identified as priorities, and some of that big planning stuff makes a huge difference in the budget.
If I
Did that
asked,
answer your question?
if I asked the Villager newspaper at the Villager Cafe whether they're willing to set up a table on Fridays or someday for people to come in and talk about the budget,
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
would one of us need to be there?
Yes.
Actually, no, just leave the owl. And we'll record it and see what happens.
We could have a little confessional booth where people can just get out all of their grievances.
I'm just looking for.
I've always kind of dreamed of doing that, just like setting up a place where people could just, nothing is off topic, just.
That's one of those suggestion boxes.
Ray will do the AI summary later to like.
Sanitize it.
I think
The
that's a good
Villager,
idea,
the
but
Villager might do it.
if the budget committee members or select board members are gonna be there, they need to be very careful about
All we're doing is
agreeing or
listening.
disagreeing.
All we're doing is
Right,
listening.
no commitment,
Just listening.
Just walk, tread
no
carefully.
promises.
It's just a thing,
Yeah,
not
that's
to
it.
say.
I like that idea though.
I do
Yeah.
too. I also like the idea of the survey, you know, just trying to like reach people in different ways.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. This was really, really helpful. I appreciate you making the time, because I know everyone's trying to leave Maine about now.
Why?
I left last week.
February break.
Oh,
Now, are you gonna let the chair of our select board and the chair of the budget or?
Committee know what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Let them know that
That's right.
Okay, yeah.
they either have to listen to the conversation. I don't know what the budget committee chair situation is, but
Jill,
I guess you guys decide that.
I think
Oh,
Sarah was, they voted last year.
Oh, they
to
voted
make
last year.
Sarah the chair,
They
because
voted
we didn't do that the year before, and then it got
About the two,
awkward.
Okay.
the two
Yes,
of you
yeah.
from last year.
Awkward. All right, I'm gonna sign us off.
There's only 8 of us.
It seems a little small.